Right, we're getting back to the normal schedule. 8 o'clock. Actually, shorter staffing, nice to schmack a daffing. I don't know where Ben is because there's no mathematics today. Yes. God says that. God says, Rabbi would always start on a light note. Anyway, there was this fellow.
Sorry, I took your away. Sorry, I took his away.
I like you say it.
No, I'm telling. What the Torah gives us halachas. The Torah does. Once you got the halachas, we stick to the halachas as they are. The halacha is meat. So you allowed to eat vegetables and things. What?
They should be eating meat during the night.
What about the potatoes that have been cooked in the
Fleischig oven is fine. Fleischig pot is fine. And fleischig gravy is not good.
That's possible.
No, let's say, for example, chicken soup. You want to eat the carrots out of the chicken soup, that's no good. Because it's absorbed. Oh, Ben, I was just saying, I don't know where you are. We need you for the mathematics later. Very good. Anyway, I just say, wait to kick it to Rob. We start off with a lighter note. There was this fellow, he had a pet centipede. And one day he needs his paper, he needs some idea picked up. So he asks the pet, can you go and get me the paper? And half an hour later, he sees this, he's not got the papers, not arrived. He says, what are you doing? What's taking so long? So give me a chance. I need to put my shoes on. So that is, that's the, not sure I have to connect it somehow to Succca. Chaim kindly put up some pictures on the later on. We're up to Zainam with Beis 10 lines from the top. So one of the psulim in our Mishnah is Chamosa Mubu Mitzilos if there's too much sun. That means there's more sun than shade. There's Chamosa Mubu Mitzilos Psula. Tono Abon. Chamosa Machmas Sichuch Velui Machmas Tfonis. That the sun is shining in through the roof, not through the walls. Sometimes you can have a sukkah where there's a good schach. The schach is very good. But the sun is coming in through the sides. According to the Tanakam of this Beis, it's perfectly okay because you've got a good schach. You have to also have good walls. So if there's no good walls, that means if the walls are, for example, like lattice frames or something like that, or made out of Tzoas Pesach. Yes, Rav Yoshi argues. Rav Yoshi argues. The Gemara says that even when you're sitting underneath the schach, you're not sitting underneath the shade. The schach, it's different. Here we're talking about a situation. You've got proper schach. It's only, let's say, 5 amas high, but the walls, for example, are all made out of windows. So what happens is because they're all made out of windows, the sun is shining in, so you're covered in sun. According to the Tanakh, it doesn't matter because you've got good schach. According to Rabbi Yoshe, it's no good. You should put the peroiches as a schach, as a cover on the oven. The oven was where? Where was the oven? Where was the peroiches? Between. In what way is the peroiches covering the oven? It's a posh pshat in the pasuk. The sachoisa the oven. You shall cover on the oven as a peroiches. How can you? It's not covering the oven. It's against the oven. Says Rabbi Yoshe is a right that the word schach doesn't just refer to that which is on top, but it also refers to the wall around. And therefore, if the sun is coming in through the walls around, it's also no good. So the Sachoisa Oven teaches us that the walls around the Oven are also called schach, and therefore you mustn't have sun coming in through the walls, and you have to have protection from the walls as well. Yes, according to Yoshe, that's very good. Yes. No, it can be any material. It's not schach, but there has to be a protection. The sachos means a protection. It says, well, the Gemara explains, more elaborates, the Torah calls it a schach. The mechitza has to be like schach. The peroiches would go up, and then it would go a little bit inwards, that it should cover a little bit the area which the oven was inside. Sometimes you have these curtains which have drapes over the curtains. So it's not really the same because it's a different material usually, and it's usually a different piece. But if you would have a curtain sometimes which go up and then inwards. So the Purichas didn't go like straight up, but it actually went up, and then afterwards it was bent towards the Owen. So go Machlekas was shot in the possible Sachois al Owen. According to Beis, we learn from here that the wall around is what's called the Schach. And according to the Chachamim, all it means is that the Purichas itself went up and a little bit up, a little bit bent. Omar Abai, Rabbi, Rabbi Yishio, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, Gamliel, Ubei Shammai, Rabbi Lezer, V'Acherim, Kulu Svulu, they all hold Sukkah as Kerabino. This is actually what's called a shitta. A shitta means that we have a number of Tanoim that all say the same halacha. And there's a famous principle the Rif quotes often. Now, what's the Rif say about a shitta? Very good. We never pass like a shitta. And here's the exception to the rule, a little bit exception to the rule. But let's get clear. Shitta is, many times Gemara says it, that he collected a lot of different Tanoim that spoke about a variety of different topics. And he says there's a common theme which underpins all these Tanoim. And the halacha is we never paskin like a shitta. It's one of these strange things. We don't paskin like a shitta. So it says Abaya, I have a lot of Tanoim, Rabbi Yishio, a lot of Tanoim, all of them, what underpins their shitta, what underpins their shitta, that a sukkah has to be a permanent building, not a temporary one. And we will see now how he explains it, how he underpins it. I mean, it's not all saying the same thing. They're all saying a variety of different things. But the logic behind them all was the same. By the way, who's Achevim? Meir. Why was it called Achevim? He was kicked out of the Beis, and one other reason why he was kicked out of the Beis because he learned from Acher, and Acher will come to it in Hovis and Mitzvah. But I said it's from Meir. So Kulu Sviulu Sukkah de Askeva, I've been on Nitav Sukkah. What we're going to do is going to bring a lot of shittas. And by the way, Tesis points out that Tesis over here is Kulu Sviulu, it's 1 to 3 Tesis from the bottom. I just want to read out the first few words. Al Kochach Inon Shovin. They don't all hold actually the same halacha, because we will see that some of them actually argue with each other. But the idea being is it's this, the roots of the ideas are similar. So what are all these shittas? Rabbi Detanya. Rabbi Yomi calls Sukkah Shem Ba'abamas Arabamas Pasula. We don't pass like Rabbi. Rabbi holds the Sukkah has to be 4 by 4 amas, right? Now, why would you say such a thing? Why should you have such a big Sukkah? What's wrong with a smaller Sukkah? Answer. Rabbi holds that a Sukkah has to be a proper building. And if it's less than 4 amas by 4 amas, we had before, it's not a house, it's potter from what? What is it potter from? Mezuzah, Makkah, and other things. So you see that Rabbi held that a sukkah has to be a cheftza of a house, has to be a proper house. That's Rabbi. Enough, like the Pirchim sukkah is no good. That what did the Beis say? The walls have to be strong enough the sunlight doesn't get in. What's underpinning his svar? They say you can't use flimsy windows and use that. You have to have a proper wall. It's the same idea as Rabbi that the sukkah has to be a substantial building. Rabbi Yehuda did Tanan sukkah shigivay malavesimamo psula. Rabbi Yehuda machship. And we had 3 explanations. What is the machlekes Rabbanon and Rabbi Yehuda? And what's the third explanation was Rava. What did Rava say? To ask Keva. And Rabbi Yehuda says that it's more than 20 amas, it's still kosher. So therefore, you see that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't care if it's more than 20 amas. Why does he not care? Because Rabbi Yehuda holds that a sukkah has to be a substantial building. But this Rosh asked, I don't know, he says. So that Abaya, when Rava told us that explanation, he asked the question, what will happen if you ever make a sukkah made out of iron? And Rava gave an answer, and I never liked it. And now Abaya explains that Rabbi Yehuda holds you need to have a permanent building. What's my proof? Because there's a machlekes of Yehuda and Chachamim and the sukkah which is higher than 20 amas, but there's kosher apostle. So Abaya now has suddenly accepted Rava's opinion a few daf later.
Maybe it's just explaining the shit with the other, doesn't mean it's
Because maybe Rabbi Yehuda holds a different reason. Maybe like according to the other man, you just need that this. It doesn't care about this. Who holds that reason? Okay, Rabbi Yehuda holds more than 20 amas as kosher because there's a man having a substantial building. Rabbi Shimon the Tanya, Shtaim kel chosim v'sholosh filu tefach. We learned this yesterday that according to the Chachamim, you need to have 2 proper walls and 1 a tefach. Rabbi Shimon Eimer sholosh kel chosim v'arba filu tefach. He holds that the 4th one has to be a tefach. And yesterday we said 5 different explanations. But the last of the explanations was Rabbi Shimon held that unless you have 3 walls, it's not a protection. Wind and the sun can get in. If you've got 2 walls, it's not a protection. A reish with a little bit at the end is not going to protect you. But a ches with a little bit extra can protect you. But we see the idea that Rabbi Shimon holds you have to have a proper substantial sukkah. Gamliel the Tanya. If you make a sukkah on the top of a ship or on top of a wagon, Here they've got beautiful pictures, but I didn't put them up. Or maybe he did actually. He did put them up. You don't need any imagination. A ship, a sukkah on top of a ship is very easy to picture. And Gamliel Poisel, Rabbi Kiva Machshir. Now, why does Rabbi Gamliel say it's possible to sukkah on top of a ship or on top of a wagon? According to Abaye's explanation at this stage of the Gemara, because you just come in, you have a substantial building. When you put something on top of a boat, that's not substantial. Because it keeps, Rashi says that boats are very, very windy. And then Agola keeps moving around. Okay, so he's asking, you can have a boat, sometimes it can be anchored. Okay. If you've got a sukkah which is enough for you. Now, the Shammai say it's possible. Why does Shammai say it's possible? What's wrong with such a small sukkah? The answer is because you need a substantial sukkah. And here, says Tosfos, we see that it's very strange. Before we had Rabbi that says need to have 4 armors. What did Rabbi say? The logic of Rabbi need a substantial sukkah. And then he says, Shammai say need to have 7 tvachim, enough to fit in your table as well. Also the same thing, but they disagree with each other. One says 4 armors and one says 7 tvachim. Says Tosfos that Rabbi doesn't mean to say they're all saying the same thing. Rabbi means to say that they're all coming from the same direction. So this picture I wanted to put up, and you put the numbers on. But here there's 2 kinds of sukkahs. One, where there's no roof. I don't know why they put a decorative thing on top. But literally, you've got 2 walls going like this, like a tent. Or even less, you just lean a wall against, you lean schach against the wall, and you sit underneath it. Can you see the pictures? So those 2 pictures, what's the din in such a case? So the Gemara here says, so you see over here, what's wrong with it? It's not a substantial sukkah. That's not a normal way to, that's not a substantial home. A tent is not a kishmak. Every time you stand up, you bump your head into something. It's not a kishmak sukkah. Like a bird coop. Chicken coop, no corners, and the person is not comfortable, it seems, in a room that has no corners. You don't feel the whole time, you feel very cramped. So therefore, all these people hold now. So as you said very correctly, we don't paskin like a shitta. So if that's which one do we paskin like? That's 7 tvachim, you need a 7 tvachim. So the man over here, the kasha that we don't pass like a shitta, how can we pass like a shammai? And he says, because over here we had the previous story where the Gemara says, and we'll get it again later in Succca, that the Gemara tells us clearly that we do pass like a shammai. Within the shitta is also we don't usually pass like. It's interesting. A sukkah which is made like a round, what's a good word for furnace. If 24 people can sit around it, if not, it's possible. Now, I would say time it outside, get clear. Rabbi says, here's a picture of it. You don't need a picture of it, it's not nice to see. You've got a sukkah which has got 24 people that can fit around it, then it's kosher. If less than 24 people cannot fit around it. We've had so far 3 opinions about how big a sukkah needs to be. Anybody remember the 3 opinions? Very good. 6 tvachim, 7 tvachim, 4 amos. Now, obviously, Rabbi Yehuda says 6 tvachim is basically an amo by an amo. You can't get 24 people within an amo by an amo. Right? So, obviously, it's going to be shittas Rabbi. Now, tiny bit of mathematics. If you've got a circle, because he's about a circle, how many times this is circumference times the diameter? Circumference is what we call the line going all the way around, so it's never mass. Diameter is thing. What is it? 3.14 extension. Pi, very good, pi. Now, the Gemara is 1 and 3. And the Vagin Tisrosh, and to Gavram Yosef, the Kaiman on she says, anything which is a round circle of 3 tvachim, yesh b'ocher tefach is a tefach. Would you agree with this Rashi or not? Not that we can out to agree or disagree with Rashi. What would you say? Rashi says anything with a circumference is 3, the diameter is 1. What would you say? We say it's a little bit less than 1 because slightly less than 1. Yes, it's slightly less. Rashi then brings a pasuk to support it. it was 10 amas across, and it took 30 amas to go around. The Tirs Rosh is a Tirs Rosh, which everybody quotes, Tirs Rosh in Eruvin, if you dial it, says that this pasuk teaches us. The pasuk is a question. Tirs Rosh himself knew this problem. That means the pasuk says 30 amas went around the mikvah shlema and 10 amas diameter. What do you mean? One of the measurements is incorrect. Says the Tirs Rosh, from this pasuk we learn that it is so close to 3 that halachically you can rely on 3 and you'll be yotza. So anything which the Torah says you need an amma across, you do 3 amas round, the Torah teaches us from this pasuk of Shlomo Melech's mikvah, which was a 10 amma. The pasuk is teaching us that it is so close that it is correct and that it's kosher. Do you hear the words of Tirs Rosh? It's ancient Tirs Rosh. Because otherwise you're always going to be struggling and say to me, it's not exact. The answer is it is. This pasuk is telling us that's close enough that it is exact. That's good enough. Okay. So if we need 24 people, obviously Rabbi Yehuda is going to be Shittas Rebbe. Shittas Rebbe is what? How much you need? 4 hours, 4 hours. So now we're going to have to try and work out. Now, Rebbe was talking about a square, 4 by 4. Rabbi Yehuda was talking about a circle. A furnace is a circle. And Rabbi Yehuda said you need 24 people to go around. We're going to try and adapt the words of Rabbi Yehuda to Rebbe to try and fit that the two should be the same. And we're going to struggle with it. As anybody can work out, Rebbe says 4 amas by 4 amas, which is how many, if a person is the width of a person, usually an amma. So how many people would you expect according to Rebbe? How many people would you expect? 16. It's 4 by 4 by 4. Now by a circle, would you want more or less? Why less? Well, it depends. If you're going to do 4 amas across without...
Circle is outside or inside?
That means the circle is within the square. How many would you need? Anybody tell me, Ben? How many would you need if the circle is inside the square?
12.
Right in even. 12. 12, because we worked out 4 across. The circumference is 3 times as much, so it's 12. If the circle, though, is around the square, that means a circle not inscribed in a square, but a circle out of a square, how many people would you need to go across round?
24.
How many more? I thought 4 more. Actually, you only need 2 more. It's very interesting. We'll work it all out. But this is how we're going to work out now. And then the problem is, none of these numbers work with Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so now we're going to learn some maths. Let's go. Rabbi Yehuda again. Succca kifsha, which is made like a furnace. That means the way to work it out, if you don't have a tape measure, is to ask 24 people to come into your sukkah. And that way you save yourself measuring it. Who's he like Rebbe? Rashi explains it's not like Rebbe, as we're going to see in a minute, doesn't feel like Rebbe either, but he's certainly not like Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So the most closest is likely to be is Rebbe, because Rebbe is the biggest. Says the Gemara, the Omar calls Sukkah that every sukkah need has to be 4 by 4. Mechti, since Gavabama Yosef, a person takes an amos space, and every make a sheva brachas, so you have to measure your room. And if there's, let's say, 60 square amas, you can fit in 60 people comfortably. You don't need to worry about tables and chairs and eating. Main thing. Anyway, so what says over here that if you got amma, it's good enough. Anything that you have a circumference of 3, you can get a diameter of a tefach. It's always 1. But trace a sagi. The Gemara starts off with how many should you need? 12. Why? Let's work it out. The Gemara at this stage is talking about a circle which is a 4 diameter. 4 diameter circumference will be 3 times as much as 12. So you only need 12 people. If you can fit 12 people inside your sukkah, you should be okay. Why did Rabbi Yehuda get to 24? Top of Ches Amud Aleph. Let me go straight to it, pushes this obvious answer. That's if you've got a circle with a diameter of 4 amas. But it's a square. Rabbi says you need a 4 by 4 square, but it's you need more. Says the Gemara, how much is a square more in the circumference than a circle? That means the circumference of a square, how much more is it than the circumference of a circle? It's a quarter, it's very obvious. If you've got 4 by 4 by 4 is 16. But if you've got a circle which is 4, the circumference is only 12. And the answer is simple, because by square, you're always going to have to times it by 4. By a circle, you only times it by 3. So a square is always going to be a quarter more. The circumference of a square is always going to be more than the circumference of a circle, exactly a quarter. So therefore, how many? Not clear? It is. So what says we both Beshitza Sagi, each needs 16. So what says no. That is a circle which you're taking away, which is inscribed inside a square. But when you need a circle, a circle which encircles the square, you need more because of the protrusion of the corners. So if you've got a square which is 4 by 4, and then you're making a circle around the square, so the circle has to have more than the square. This is a picture of it. So here we've got a circle around the square. We said it's a quarter more. But here we've got the blue. If you look at the blue circle is much, much bigger than the square. Because what happens is you've got to include the area which protrudes out of the square. So therefore the area now is going to be much more circumference. Says the Gemara, let's work it out. How much is the diagonal of a square? Anybody know? Very close. No, 1.4. So now you can work it out. If the diagonal of a square is 1.4, so therefore a 4 amma square, how much would the diagonal be? 5.6. That means if you go from a square, I did this more before, so it's easier for me. I'm not saying out there. Here, the diagonal of a square is 5.6. So now if you times 5.6 by 3, you'll get to 17 minus 2 or something. 16.8. It must say 17 minus 0.2. The point is like this. We started off with saying you need only 12 because that's a 4 diameter, 12 circumference. The Gemara says, no, it's a square. So it said, oh, that's got 16. And the Gemara says, no, it's a circle around the square. The way to work out a circle around the square is to take the diagonal of the square, and that's the longest point of the circle. Right? You take the diagonal of the square. If you've got a circle around the square, so you take the longest point of the square, the longest line, and that's 5.6. So then the circle around it is only 16.8. So you only need to have 17 people, or very close to 17 people around your sukkah. How did Rabbi Yehuda get to 24? Says the Gemara again. Mechdi, since kol amsa buribu amsa v'chei chumshi, every amma, when you square it, that means that the diagonal of it is amsa v'chei chumshi balach soina, will be an amma and 2/5. An amma and 2/5 is a way of saying 1.4. An amma and 2/5 balach soina on the slant. So what happens is you only need 17.2. So you only need 17 people. How did you get to 24? I hope it's clear. If it's not clear, stop me. Basically, if you work out the circle around the square, it's only 17. Answer is more low dog. Rabbi Yehuda was imprecise. It wasn't exact. Anything more. When do we say something's imprecise? Not accurate. Pulta. It's a little bit. That means if you go from 16 to 70, maybe. He's gone from 17 to 24. How did he say you need 24 people when really you only need 6 to 17? Can you say low dog? Sometimes this says it, sometimes this doesn't say it. That ma kashisha, what's the translation of kashisha? Old. And there was another ma yenuka. Yenuka means the young. So which one was older, ma kashisha or ma yenuka? It's machlokes which way around was older. Some say ma kashisha was older because it was older, and ma yenuka was young, he was younger. Some say ma kashisha was born when his father was old, and Mayanuka was born when his father was young. So really, the Mayanuka was much older. Anyway, he had 2 sons. One he called Makashisha, one he called Mayanuka. So if you want to have names for your sons, you can look at it. So what happens is he called Makashisha Bidam Chisra Ravashi. Bisov is Gabba Bamsi Yosef. You think that person takes up an ammo? No. Tilosa Gavi, but Tamsi Yosef. You can fit 3 people into 2 ammos. You've got more people into your Shabbat Brachas now. So what happens is you can fit 3 people into 2 ammos. That means like this. What he's trying to say is normal person takes an amma. When you squash 3 people together, when you're all sitting next to each other, you can fit 3 into 2. So now from 24 people was 24 ammos, but now it's 3 into 2. We're taking off a third. If we take off a third, how much do we have left? 16. Now before we said how much do you need? 16.8. It's not so far off. Let's see the Gemara inside. We don't remember the 16.8? Who will be? No, but nice. With the cheshbon of the calculation 16.8, you got to clear. Because the diagonal of a square is 5.6, and then times that by 3, it comes to 16.8. Says the Gemara. Let's see the word inside. This was it does go to times. How much it come to Shitza? Comes 16. And non Shivsanaki Chumshapinon. But we need 17.2. So 17 minus point.
Did he finish yet?
We need 17 minus 0.2. Loidok says the Gemara. He was imprecise. When do you say it's imprecise? Lechumra. Lekulam Yaminon. Here, he's got it wrong. You always say you get a bit more to be careful. But here he said you only need 24 people, which is 16 amas. But 16 amas is too little. So that's no good. Says the Gemara. A person needs an am. He was still basically the difference is were the people sitting around the sukkah or within the sukkah. The Gemara at this stage explains we're talking about where they're sitting, where the sukkah is within them. If the sukkah is within them, so the space is only 6 amas from person to person. Each person takes up an amma squared. Now, if you picture 24 people, so if you picture 24 people putting the sukkah all around them, so that's a very big sukkah. It's 8 amas across because we said anything which is, it's a third, right? If you've got 24 amas circumference, it's 8 amas diameter. So if you've got 24 people circumference, you have an 8 amma diameter sukkah. That's a very, very big sukkah. You don't need such big sukkah. But if you say that the people are all sitting out of the sukkah is within them, you've only got a 6 amma diameter. And therefore, and that's correct. The 6 amma diameter works very well because before we said 5.6. Here is the picture. As you can see the picture, is what happens is the sukkah is on the inside. Once you got the people on the inside, did you take this picture as well?
Yeah.
Oh, very good. So the people on the inside, you lose an amma, right? If you imagine a circle of people, and then you've got the sukkah within the people. So that means until now we understood you take 24 people, ask them to sit around your sukkah. If they all fit in within your sukkah, it's kosher. Now we're saying no. You ask 20 people to stand outside your sukkah, and they should all crowd around outside the sukkah. And if the sukkah is within them, then it is kosher. And that's exactly right. Because if each person takes up an amma by an amma, so the circumference will be 24. But what will happen is each person takes up an amma, so the inner diameter will only be 6 instead of 8. 6 by 6 circle is correct, because before we said you need it to be 5.6. From 5.6 to 6 is very, very close, and therefore that wasn't precise. So the Shivsa really, you could have done less, could have done 17 minus 0.2. He was a bit more machmir, and therefore he wasn't machmir. There's just a few more lines. The Rabbanim and Dayanim lived in Caesarea. Only they said a certain mathematical equation which does not work according to our science, but according to their mathematical equations, which does not work according to our understanding, Rabbi Yechanan's halacha is correct. They said like this: river. A circle less than a square, you have to minus a quarter. If you take a room and you square, and you draw a circle within it, how much a quarter? That Rashi says is mathematically true. And not only is it mathematically true, Rashi says it has no relevance to this Gemara. But that is the fact, that if you take a square, then what happens is that fits in the circle inside. It's quite important, like you want to know a circle, you work it out. And it's actually quite easy to work it out, because we said a circle which is 4 by 4 is a 16 circumference. Which is also 16 square amas. We make a circle inside it. We said the circumference is going to be 12, the diameter is 3, and the whole area inside it will be less a quarter, which is 12. Okay. Top of Chesed Beis, and this is the part which they added, which explains Rabbi Yechanan, but it doesn't explain because we don't understand it. But when you take a square out of a circle, that means you've got a huge circle, and then you do a square within a circle. How do you have to take off half? Half meaning half of what is of what's remaining, which is the third. So, for example, if you've got a circle which the circumference is 24, the square inside it will be 16. Half of 16 is 8. 16 plus 8 is 24. So half of the square, which is inside the circle, is you lose when the square is within the circle. And according to that, Rabbi Yochanan would be good. What did Rabbi Yochanan tell us? That you need 24 people, which comes to a circumference of 24 amas, which is very good. Why? A circumference of 24 amas, we're going to B'shittas Rabbi. Rabbi says it's 4 by 4 is 16 amas. And that's correct because you take off the 24, you take off 8, which is half of the square, you'll get to 16. And therefore, which is exactly right, which is the size that you need. But says the Gemara, the problem is, it's not true. If it would be true that when you take a square out of a circle, you lose half the circumference, then Rabbi Yochanan would be halachically correct. But the problem is that's not true. That is not true. That you do not need so much area and you don't lose so much. And there's a very long thesis there, identical thesis almost in Eruvin, that he tries to understand how could the people in Kesari make such a mathematical mistake. And he says two different explanations. One is we're not talking about a normal circle inside the square. We're talking about what's called a diamond inside the square. You lose half. Another explanation is, and this is very interesting, if you do a circle, then a square, and then a circle within the square, then that circle loses half the diameter, half the circumference of the circle which is out of the square. But the problem is that as Tosfos justifies Rabbanan of Kesari, he's then stuck with another big problem. And that is, if that's the case, it's difficult to understand. But Yochanan came along and said 24 amas. Now, we explained Rabbi Yochanan one way, is that we're talking about that the sukkah is on the inside, so it's only 6 amas across, which explains very nicely. But the problem with the problem is the Gemara tries to find another way to justify Rabbi Yochanan. How? By telling us a mathematical equation which doesn't work. Says Tosfos, I'll find you a way to make it work. But once he makes a mathematical equation, for example, he says a diamond within a square. If he saw a diamond within a square, Rabbi Yochanan was never talking about it. He was talking about the square within a circle. And therefore, if you justify within Kesari, you're left with the stuck how to explain Rabbi Yochanan. And if you don't justify within Kesari, you're stuck, and nobody's explained how to justify them both, other than the Meiri who says that they misunderstood each other and each one was talking about a different thing, and that's how you can explain it. I just want to say one very, very, very big question from the Chasam Sofer. I was very happy because I thought of the question myself. I was wondering if anybody would chap it. So anyways, I could be learning Hachas Mezuzah a little bit. We discussed quite a bit a Machlekes Rambam and Rosh. And the Beis Yosef writes that the Rosh is so wrong, I'm not even going to quote him. What did the Rosh say? The Rosh said that for a room to be Chayv and Mezuzah, it's not enough to have 16 square amas. It actually has to be 4 by 4. So if you've got a long, narrow corridor, according to the Rosh, you do not need to put a mezuzah there. That's it, it's 2 by 8. You do not need a mezuzah. Says the Beis Yosef, who's ever heard of such a thing? The main thing is that there's 16 square amas, and if it's 2 by 8 or 1 by 16, yeah, if you know mathematics, 1 amma wide, 16 ammas long, you need a mezuzah. And the Beis Yosef doesn't even quote the Rosh in the Shulchan Aruch. He doesn't quote it. The Beis Yosef does, but not in the Shulchan Aruch. Chasif asked, and I was bothered about this as well. Rabbi Yochanan is discussing a sukkah b'shittas Rabbi. Rabbi is the most machmir that you need to have 4 by 4. It is logical to assume that Rabbi's 4 by 4 is the same of the 4 by 4 mezuzah, like the Gemara actually suggests it's the same shitta. If that's the case, if we don't hold up the Rosh, you don't actually need to have 4 by 4 square. You only need to have 16 square amas of area. If that's the case, Rabbi Yochanan's area should be even less. Are you with me? If anybody's with me, it's a very, very difficult question. That means the Gemara justified Rabbi Yochanan by saying that Rabbi Yochanan held you need to have a square of 4 by 4, like Rabbi, and then you need to have a circle that goes around the square, and you need to have the circle big enough that the whole square should fit in. Let's say the circle would be a tiny bit smaller, and you can't get in a square of 4 by 4, but it's got an area of 16 square amas. Would that be a kosher sukkah according to Rabbi or not? What would you say? The Chod Rosh would be. So according to the Rosh, it would not be. Rather, Rosh would be. And the way the Mechaber says it would be. And if that's the case, Rabbi Yochanan's shver. How can Rabbi Yochanan say you need 24 people? You still don't need 24 people. You need much less. Because as long as you've got the square amas of 16 amas, it's an unbelievable question. The Chasam Sofer says I do not have an answer. It's a kasha on the Rambam. The Rambam and Beis Yosef, they argue on the Rosh. They say that it doesn't make a difference whether it's 4 by 4 or 8 by 2 or 16 by 1, as long as there's 16 square amas footage inside it, it's okay. If that's the case, Rabbi Yochanan would need a much smaller sukkah, because Rabbi Yochanan made it a very big sukkah because he wanted to have a square of 4 by 4 within it. But it's not necessary to have a square 4x4 in it. As long as you've got the 16 square meters inside it. Okay, we have got a bit complicated. Now I've got much easier. More. Top 2 lines for the top. Chesed and Beis. In those days, even nowadays, actually, I think I've seen it, to go to these shops where they make pottery. So what happens is he has an inner room where he lives, he sleeps, he eats. That's his life. And an outer room where he puts the merchandise for people to come and sell. And sometimes you come in, the bell rings, and the person comes popping out of his in a shop and comes to ask you what you want, and he tells you the price you want for your life. And the Beis, the 2 rooms. So the question is, what's the halacha of these 2 rooms? So this is like this. The inner one can never be used as a sukkah. Even if it's got kosher schach. The chayeves b'mezuzah requires mezuzah. But the outer one sukkah can be used as a sukkah b'tum mezuzah. The reason is like this. This is an interesting halacha. We'll talk about it in Tofei Shlamet Hey. Now those who do Dilshu just did it this week. No, sorry, not just this week. So you have to be ahead on it. The halacha is like this. We pass in Machlekes Shama B'Silo. Do you have to build the sukkah l'Shem sukkah? We pass in what? No, we pass in don't. So you're right that we're machmir to do something. We pass in you don't need to. So if you, for example, middle of the year, decide that it's too hot outside, you're going for a barbecue, you're too hot. So what you do is you put up a few 4 walls, and you put on some schach, and you have no intention for sukkahs at all. You're just literally too hot, and you do it for shade from the sun, and then you come back there, sukkahs chalamoid, you say, hey, that sukkah is still up. Can I use it? The halacha is a yes, you're allowed to use it. That's what we pass. Shabbat say no, we say yes, we pass it for no. But there's a couple of exceptions. The main exception being that it has to be originally built for the sake of having shade, not for the sake of living, and not for the sake of modesty. That means not because you want to hide from a neighbor, and not because of the fact that you want to live there. It has to have been built only for shade. This nuance is a difficult nuance to get used to, because it takes time to work out when you build it. Did you build it for shade, or did you build it because you want people to watch you? But that is the halacha. Says the Gemara over here, the inner room can never be used as a sukkah, because that's his living quarters. So he's not doing it for shade, he's doing it for modesty, he's doing it because he wants to live there, not for shade. But the outer one, he only pops in and out. So therefore, if he puts up the schach there for shade, is kosher. Now, for mezuzah, it's the other way around. Mezuzah, you need to have a living space. Somewhere which is not a living space, not chai mezuzah. So the inner one is chai mezuzah, the outer one is potter for mezuzah. So that's what the Gemara says. Very the Gemara. Okay, that the outer one should be potter for mezuzah because he doesn't live there very much. All he does is, for example, let's say you've got an office. The strict halacha is your office does not require a mezuzah. It doesn't require a mezuzah. And if you put a mezuzah up, you should make a bracha. Because you don't live there, unless people actually have a room to sleep there or they stay there overnight. But usually most people don't. So if you've got, let's say, a shop, right? Let's say, I don't know what. So you've got a shop. You don't put mezuzah, but you don't know. We do nowadays, but without a bracha. The halacha is that a porch which leads onto a main room requires a mezuzah. These pottery houses were moved around from day to day. That means it wouldn't stay there for very long. It's very like a marketplace kind of pottery. So what happens is, halacha is that you only chayav on the porch if it leads into a main room, which is a proper living space. But here, where all it is an entranceway to get into a room, which is not a permanent room, it's potter for mezuzah. And that's also halacha, that there are certain rooms which we don't put a mezuzah, if they're not made as a proper living space. If it's a proper living space, then even the room to it is chayav mezuzah. If it's not a proper living space, it's not.
That's only if you presumably not done it.
No, if you do it for mitzvah, you're right. If you do it for mitzvah, it's always good. Yes, that's right. Right, yeah.
So does that mean that none should?
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly the next Gemara. Tolu Gamvach. What's Succca's Nashim, a woman built? Succca's Behema, which you built for animals to be protected from the sun. Succca's Kutim were people that became gay. The common denominator of all these 4 groups of, not people, one of the animals, is that none of them are chayav mezuzah. They're all kosher sukkah. Mikol mokim, or any kind of sukkah, ksher. Sukkah mikol mokim means any kind of sukkah, ksher. As long as the schach is correct. Now, my kelchos, what do you mean the schach correct? We will explain. it doesn't mean that the schach puts on correctly. Because if that would be the case, you wouldn't need to tell me such a thing. Every sukkah, if you don't put the schach on, it's not kosher. So what means sucheches kol-chasa? That you made it for shade from the sun. And the Rishonim explain that what happens is you have to put on extra schach. Therefore, to prove that you're doing it for shade. Mishabur actually quotes this. Let's just see. Omar Chista, I don't know if you've got it. It's about 8 lines from the wide lines by me and Rashi. It's got a lot of schach. You didn't just do it for modesty. You don't need to make a sukkah for the sake of sukkahs. It's only called a sukkah which is made L'Shem sukkah if it's made for protection from the sun. So if you make it for modesty, not. To live in, not. But if you make it just to protect you from the sun. So let's say a group of goyim came, they're making a barbecue, and they're getting very, very hot, and they decided to put up schach just for the sake that they should keep them away from the heat, and you want to use it chalamot sukkah, you want to give it on sukkahs, it's a kosher sukkah. Now the Beis finished off, sukkah mikol mokim, any kind of sukkah is kosher, lasur mai. What's that including lasur? Sukkahs rakvash. And the Lord explains this in Rosh Hashanah, son of Rabbanon, sukkahs rakvash, sukkahs roim, shepherds. Sukkahs kaitzim are those that look after figs to make sure that they're dried properly. Sukkahs burgening, that's sukkah made for godmen. Sukkah shemeperos, people look after the fruit. Sukkah mikamokim, or any kind of sukkah, kasher ad shem sucheches kelchasa. My kelchasa, like we explained before, of course it doesn't mean that you put the schach correctly, because that would be by any sukkah. What would you say it over here? Mavchista v'shosu letzil sukkah mikamokim la'asur. My sukkah gamach. That means we've got two Beises. Both Beises mention 4 kinds of sukkahs, and both Beises finish off with this expression, and also any other kind of sukkah is also kosher. And the Gemara each time says that each Beis is coming to include the other 4. So the question obviously has to be asked, why does one Beis tell us 4 and say, and also any kind of sukkah, which means the other 4? And why does the other Beis say the other 4 and then say any kind of sukkah, which includes the other 4? What's the logic of the Beises? Says the Gemara, Hi Tana, the Ganvach, the one who held the first one, the 4 categories of people, that part of the sukkah, Alimene Ganvach, Mishum de Kvi. He wants to talk about those because they're established in one place. The Kotonomy called Mokim Akvash to include the other kinds of sukkahs to the Kvi. Because it's made by people that are obligated in sukkah. The Tanami called Mokim Ganvach, the Lav de Chiyuvaninu, they're not Mechuyev. So in the Beis, we pass that all 8 of these sukkahs are kosher, as long as it was made for shade. Mishnah points out, not only all 8 are kosher, but even if you have both chesronos together, for example, let's say a goy makes a sukkah, which is already one cheson. Why is it a cheson? Because a goy's part of it's a sukkah. Cheson number 2 is he makes the sukkah because he wants to guard for a temporary amount of time, which is another cheson, because it's not even an established place. He's doing it as a temporary thing. Nevertheless, even if you have both drawbacks together, it's a kosher sukkah, but as long as it was made, the shem sale. You have to know that it was made for protection from heat, protection from the sun, and if it was made for any other reason, it's not kosher. So if you've got a hut which you make to store things in, and then you want to change it into a sukkah, you can't. You have to do something to the schach, even if you have kosher schach. Why? Because it wasn't made for protection from the sun. And Yisroel brings down this Rashi, which we just mentioned, that there has to be mesucheches yofem. It has to have more than the normal schach to show that you're doing it to protect it from the sun. Oh, it's very good that we got up to a Mishnah. It's very good. Okay, sure, that's stuff. But I suppose all the mathematics was easy for you.